Hi, I'm Missy with On William Street, and we are here to help you become a more confident quilter, from the piecing to the quilting and everything in between. This month, we are on month 12 of our yearly quilt along. So our mystery quilt has been completed, we have quilted it, and we are now ready to bind it. So at the end of this, we are going, as we told you, we were going to have a completed, bound, ready to use quilt. So for this project, we are going to show you how to hand bind the quilt. So all of this information is going to be in the blog post, so go ahead and check that out. And then also, if you do not want to hand bind your quilt, we are going to include some links to some machine binding tutorials that we have as well, so you can go ahead and check that out. And while you're there, don't forget to check out our shop and find your next quilting project. Okay, so for this, we are actually going to sew our binding on the front of the quilt, whereas the majority of our machine binding, we tend to sew it on the back of the quilt. So we want to make sure our quilt is flipped over so we can start there. We're going to still want to leave some space so that we can attach our binding. Go ahead and just grab something, a couple of pins or something to hold it in place, and then we'll go over to the sewing machine, and we are going to sew 1/4 inch along that binding strip. So we're going to use our 1/4 inch foot, and we're just going to go ahead to cover a couple of back stitches and sew all the way along. Now we're going to sew all the way to the edge, almost to the edge of the quilt. We want about 1/4 inch from the edge is where we're going to stop. It doesn't have to be exact, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to throw a couple back stitches in there, and then you're going to pull it up from underneath the needle for a minute. You're going to fold it over so you've got a nice 45-degree angle, and then fold the top of your binding back over again. And this is what's going to give you your really nice mitered corners in your binding. And we'll flip that back over, and then you're going to start sewing right there at the top again. Do a couple of back stitches. I like to do the back stitches in my binding just to help give a little bit of extra strength as that holds it in place. And then we'll just continue to sew all the way around the quilt. We've got our binding all sewn around the front, so then we're going to go ahead and flip that over to the back. I'm going to grab a couple of pins just to hold things in place, or a clip as I'm going, just to kind of help get me started. And then to complete the binding on the back, you're going to do just a really simple little slip stitch that keeps it all invisible. Okay, so we're going to start. The first thing I want to do is kind of bury some of this thread a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of bring it up in the back of that binding. So I'm burying that up back there a little bit. And then you're just going to, actually, let's go this way. It's going to make more sense the way with my hands. Let's flip it over. So you're going to just pull just a little bit up from the back of the binding. Not get caught on the pins. And then a little bit back from the back of the quilt. And you're just going to kind of go back and forth. You can do one stitch, and then as you get a little bit more comfortable, you can do multiple stitches at a time, and then pull that. Okay, so pull a little bit from the back of the quilt. And then right there at the bottom, slightly to the back of the binding. And you'll just keep going. And then once you get comfortable, you can actually kind of do a couple of stitches. So you can kind of pull one from the back, sneak in there, grab the binding. And you'll just keep going all the way around the quilt. But every time that you need to grab some more thread. We're going to always want to bury it. So to bury your thread in it, when you poke it into the quilt, just kind of pull it in, and then I'm not going to pull it out yet, but you'll want to pull it out up here, and then you can clip the thread off at this point so that it gets stuck down into your quilt. Just gives it a little more durability. And then you'll just kind of move your clips and your pins up as you go. Just kind of help hold things in places as you're sewing that binding on. Okay, so you're probably asking, why would we take the extra time to do a hand binding on a quilt? So a couple of reasons why. One, if you're going to be submitting it into a show, it's actually the preferred method. So it tends to get a little more kudos if you've got a hand binding on your quilt for competition. And then also, if you've got points on the front of your quilt that are right there, they don't have a border on them, but they're right there along that 1/4 of an inch, sewing the binding onto the front of your quilt like that so that it's right there on that 1/4 inch is just going to help with your points to kind of keep them so that they're nice and crisp. So grab yourself a good movie, a good audio book, whichever you prefer, and sit down, and before you know it, you'll actually be finished with this quilt. And go ahead and make sure that you check out the link below our video. It's going to take you to the blog post, and that is going to have all of the instructions and the information that we went over today. You can also find the rest of our mystery quilt along for this year. If you need to get caught up on a previous month, you can find those links in the blog post as well. And while you're at it, don't forget to check out our shop, find your next quilting project, and we will see you next time. Happy quilting.